goddammit.
Well, hello there. I'm writer Mark Wooden, sci-fi wire fan creator and author of the Shadow Dance action urban fantasy saga. Welcome to the Thoughts from the Shed podcast. Do you create stories? Learn how to hook your audience and take them on an emotional ride. Not a creator? Learn why the story sucked you in, or why the story just sucked. Come with me, and you'll see a world of pure imagination, minus children dying horrible deaths in a chocolate factory. This year marks the 50th anniversary of The Godfather, directed and co-written by Francis Ford Coppola, with the novel's author Mario Puzo co-writing. This month, Paramount is releasing a super deluxe set, including 4K versions of all 3 movies and The Godfather Coda. Now, I often omit a movie in a series if it's really, really bad. For example, there's the Indiana Jones trilogy, consisting of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. A note, it's not Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's some post-marketing crap that's just as bad as Indy on the posters, going from the rugged man of mystery to this whip-happy schmuck who looks better suited for porn. Some out there would argue I should do the same with Coppola's trilogy, claiming The Godfather Part 3 an abomination, despite the artistry of the movie earning it 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director. Now, I'll admit that Part 3 is not on the level of its predecessors. However, when held against the larger pantheon of movies out there, it gets high marks, despite some unfortunate but understandable choices made by Coppola and the filmmakers. There's also the matter of audience expectations versus creator intent. But before we discuss all that stuff, a point of information. There are 2 releases of The Godfather Part 3. The first is the theatrical release from 1990. The second is the director's cut from Coppola entitled The Godfather Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone, released in 2020. Initially, I hated the Coda cut, but after listening to Coppola's commentary on the third film, I've come to accept it as the better version of the story he wanted to tell. However, 2 major things about the Coda annoy the piss out of me. For one, Michael doesn't die. How are you going to name a movie The Death of, and the bitch don't die? He died in the theatrical cut, so why the change? In the Godfather 3 commentary, Coppola states that Michael's sins were so great that the death wouldn't be enough to absolve him. He had to lose everything, and then live with that. I get it. But even if he dies losing everything anyway, so... The second thing that bugs me with the Coda is how Coppola recut the movie's opening. The earlier Godfather movies were all, this is business, not personal. If Coppola's point was to flip that script, the Coda blows the opportunity with the first frame. The theatrical cut opens with the ruins of the Corleone compound in Tahoe, then moves to the personal side of the family. For the Coda, Coppola chooses instead to begin with the business stuff. The business scene is more about Michael being the Don, not him lamenting the disconnect from his family that he longs to repair. And if you're gonna start with the business thing, why not pay homage to the opening of the first Godfather? Come on, you all remember the opening of The Godfather. Bonacera in that close-up, his first line.
I believe in America.
As he explains his plight to someone off camera. The camera slowly zooms out, and when Bonacera finishes, we get our first cut, revealing Don Vito Corleone. In the Coda, we start with an unnecessary establishing shot. The Archbishop makes his case to someone off screen, just like Bonacera. But before he even gets close to finishing, Coppola and his editors cut to Michael listening. The rest of the conversation cuts between them. Now, how awesome would it have been to be the slow zoom from the Archbishop and eventually reveal Michael as Don Corleone, firmly in charge of the criminal empire? And it's not like Coppola didn't have that shot. You actually see part of it during that scene. Considering it had been 16 real-time years since audiences had seen Michael as the Don, feels like a missed opportunity. So yeah, here I am, telling the dude who's won Oscars and helmed some of the greatest movies in cinema history how he should have made a movie. The balls, I tell ya! But you know I'm right. Before I dig into the unfortunate choices and explain why they still work, let's talk about what the movie does right. Coppola had the good fortune that he rounded up almost all of the usual suspects from the earlier films, all top-notch talent who had become legends in the years since those other films. You had Al Pacino, Diane Keaton, Talia Shire as Michael's Lady Macbeth-like sister Connie. Behind the camera, Gordon Willis returned to lens the film, giving us the warm earth tones and deep shadows that made the earlier films look so beautiful and different from the average gangster movie. Coppola also landed some top-tier new talent, with Joe Mantegna as the new breed Teflon Don Joey Zaza. He also dug up the ugly from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Eli Wallach. And of course, there's the Oscar-nominated performance from Andy Garcia as Michael's nephew, Vincent Mancini. Working together like a family unit, Coppola's team created moments of sheer genius. My personal favorite is a moment that comes when Michael hands the reins of the Corleone criminal empire over to his nephew Vincent. The scene mirrors the moment at the end of the first Godfather. In that movie, as Michael takes over the family, men kiss his hand in deference while wife Kay looks on. Then, we get that now infamous closing of the door, shutting Kay out of that side of the family. In part 3, this time it's Michael on the other side of that door. He is finally out of the criminal business and into the personal life of the family. Now let's look at some of Coppola's unfortunate choices, why they're understandable, and, in the case of casting his daughter Sofia, a hidden asset to the movie. One of the biggest unfortunate choices that plagues Part 3 is that it exists at all. The American Film Institute lists the first Godfather as their third film on their 100 Years, 100 Movies list. Godfathers 1 and 2 make IMDb's list of the top-rated movies in places 2 and 4 respectively. The film scored significantly lower on the British Film Institute's Sight and Sound magazine 100 Greatest Films. But to be in the top 25 says something, doesn't it? My point is, how do you top what are two of the best movies in the history of cinema? Why would you even try? The answer, my friends, to that second question comes down to good old American capitalist greed. Coppola felt done with the series after the first one. He only made the second one because Paramount wouldn't take his suggestion of Martin Scorsese, fresh off Mean Streets, to direct. After making Godfather Part 2, Coppola again felt he had finished with the franchise. He went off on his damned fool crusade of making Apocalypse Now and never looked back. Unfortunately, he also self-financed the movie One from the Heart. It did so poorly it damn near bankrupted Coppola. Two other relatively big-budget films he made in the 80s, Gardens of Stone and The Cotton Club, also crashed financially. In the late 80s, Paramount Studios wasn't doing too good themselves in the finance department. They needed a hit and remembered they had The Godfather in their back pocket. Bleeding for dollars and needing to support his family, when Paramount called about a third Godfather movie, Coppola took the gig.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
To produce The Godfather Part 3, Coppola faced a serious time crunch. He had just over a year to complete the movie, as Paramount was adamant about a Christmas 1990 release, so they could show a year-end profit to their shareholders. Greed, baby! Then came the dilemma that led to another unfortunate but understandable choice. As filming began, Winona Ryder, the 80s darling from Beetlejuice and Heathers, was set to play Michael's daughter Mary. Unfortunately, she got ill and had to drop from the picture. Coppola worked around the missing actress while looking for a replacement, but eventually he hit the wall where he needed someone in the part immediately. Coppola says in the movie's commentary that when he wrote the part, he patterned Mary after his real-life daughter, Sofia Coppola. When the time crunch came and his back was against the wall and he had to find the replacement now, he felt it only made sense to cast the person he'd imagined while writing. Coppola further explained his decision, saying he felt Sofia's lack of training as an actor would bring a level of realism in her performance. It's the old adage of, you don't have to act, just be yourself. Before anyone saw a lick of film, critics lambasted the decision as pure nepotism. And when the movie came out, things got worse. The Washington Post labeled her performance as hopelessly amateurish, while Time magazine said her gracelessness comes close to wrecking the movie. Despite the backlash, Coppola insists he does not regret his casting choice. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Sofia's performance didn't stand out as one note. Her SoCal personality played against the other New York Italians, and her naivete got aggravating. And that's the problem. Mary Corleone is the heart of this movie. If you don't like her, or worse, if you hate her, you'll never get the movie's main plot of Michael's attempt at redemption. However, I argue that her performance, particularly that annoying naivete, works for the character and the role she had to play in the final chapter of the Michael Corleone saga. Sliding into spoiler territory for a 31-year-old movie, folks. Ever since The Godfather Part 2, Michael Corleone struggled to make the family business legitimate and get out of their violent criminal lifestyle. By the end of that movie, he hadn't quite gotten there yet, but over the 19 years between the events of that movie and Part 3, he was close. By opening Part 3 with the family focus, Coppola presented a changed Michael, someone who now put family and the personal ahead of crime and the business. Hell, Michael even smiles and enjoys time with family in this one. He smiled maybe once in Part 2. Mary is the personification of all Michael wants for his family. She's the goodness Vito had wanted from Michael. She is pure, charitable, and completely outside of the criminal empire from which she unwittingly profits. Michael doesn't want his sins to corrupt her. But sins do have a way of catching up now, don't they? And Michael had his brother whacked for Batman's sake. Sofia Coppola's teenage girl performance is as far outside the realm of the rest of the movie as Mary is to the Corleone family's sins. It's not the best acting job, standing out among the legendary cast surrounding her, but her naivete and innocence works within the context of the story. Now let's talk about the classic struggle every creator endures: audience expectation versus creator intent. Remember in my New Jack City episode when I said pushing a theme, making your story about something, would elevate your story? That's what the first two Godfather movies did. Coppola and Puzo even used the theme we played with, how power corrupts even the best people. Unfortunately, audiences largely attached to the machinations, the darkness, and the violence in the Godfather movies and not the theme. They wanted to see Michael win at all costs. As a creator, Coppola had no interest in retreading that ground. It's like what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi. We've seen giant space stations blowing up planets, young Jedi learning the ways of the Force under a wise mentor, Harrison Ford playing Han Solo under protest. Give me something different. Coppola did exactly that for Godfather Part 3. Like Johnson did with Last Jedi, Coppola chose to age his beloved character and have him act not as the cunning warrior, but a man trying to atone for sins, but haunted by those sins. This version of Michael Corleone spoke to Coppola on a personal level. Picture it. Coppola, the aging and financially challenged creator, trying to save his family via one more deal. Michael Corleone, the aging and morally challenged Don, trying to save his family with one more deal. Outside parties trying to force both creator and Don to do things the way they wanted so they could profit from the creator and the Don's work. Things come full circle with Godfather 3 as critical reviews metaphorically assassinated Sofia, just like an assassin murdered her character Mary. In the cases of both Coppola and Michael Corleone, their enemies attacked the daughter to get at the father. Aha! Unfortunately, die-hard fans resistant to subverted expectations cried like little bitches. Hence a large part of the hate for Godfather Part 3, because I've shown there were no technical or creative reasons to hate this movie so much. It was purely a case of, Well, he didn't give me what I wanted, so I hate this movie. Irony alert. Audiences often complain about a multitude of sequels, prequels, remakes, and reboots. There's nothing original anymore, they cry. Then a creator comes along with something different, and those same audience complain, nah, it's too different, I don't like it. As a creator, understand that on some level, especially if you're making a sequel or a genre story, you have to meet a basic level of audience expectation. For example, you can't make a slasher movie where nobody dies. Even Coppola admitted that with Part 3, he pleased himself, but not the audience, and that hurt the film's reception. Unfortunately, you can't please everyone. At the end of the day, do what you think is best for your story. Make the best story you can. People somewhere will always appreciate a good story told in a unique way. Those dissenting voices, those haters, they're usually people who wouldn't know how to create if Kyle Rayner handed them the life equation. And, unfortunately, they tend to be the loudest voices. Ignore those assholes. Create what you want. You only get one shot to tell your story. And if you do get a bunch of haters, you'll be in the same club with Johnson and Coppola. That's a pretty prestigious place to be. Well, that's my defense of The Godfather Part 3. Hopefully I've given you reasons to appreciate the artistry of the movie, even if you still don't like it. As for the Thoughts from the Shed podcast, March has 3 Wednesdays in it. That would mean I'd have to do a back-to-back episodes over 2 weeks to hit that first Wednesday in April. Well, the heck with that. No full episode, but I'll give you some bonus content from this episode. Then, I'll be back on the first Wednesday schedule. That episode will also be my lucky 13 episode, so we'll have a bit of fun with that. Like what you're hearing? Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. On YouTube, hit that like button so I know you're watching. It helps with my anxiety.
Subscribe to the YouTube and sign up for the newsletter because I'm Batman and he's writer Mark Wooden.